At 61, you start looking back differently. Not with regret, I want to be clear about that, but with a kind of clarity you don't have when you're 24 and chasing a #1 ranking. Things settle. You see what actually mattered and what didn't. And one thing I keep coming back to is this: the players who shaped how I think about tennis are not always the ones who beat me the most, not always the ones with the longest trophy cabinet. Sometimes it's someone you watched from the other side of the net and thought, how is he doing that? Sometimes it's someone you never even played against. Admiration is funny that way. It doesn't follow logic, it follows something else entirely. So here are 5 players I genuinely admire, and I'll try to tell you exactly why. The first name on my list might surprise you. It's not someone from my generation. It's someone I watched as a kid before I even knew what professional tennis really was. Ilie Nastase. I know people remember Nastase for the chaos, the arguments, the theatrics, the suspensions, but that's not what I saw when I was young. What I saw was someone who could do anything with a tennis racket, anything. Shots that had no right to go in, movement that looked like it belonged in a completely different sport, a kind of freedom on the court that I had never seen before and honestly have never seen since. There's a thing I've said before and I still believe it completely. You don't idolize someone who is like yourself. You idolize someone you'd like to be like. Björn Borg was my countryman. We were both Swedish. We both played from the baseline. We both stayed calm under pressure. People compared us constantly, and I understand why. But Björn was never my idol. He was too similar to me. You don't dream about becoming something you already are. Nastase was the opposite of everything I was. He was unpredictable, he was an artist, he played with this incredible instinct, like the racket was just an extension of his imagination. When I watched him as a young boy, I didn't understand everything I was seeing, but I felt something. That's what I wanted, not to grind from the baseline for 4 hours, to feel that free. He was also the first player who showed that tennis could have real personality, real character. Before him, tennis was very polite, very controlled. Nastase walked onto the court and changed that. You could love him or hate him, but you could never ignore him. Björn was my countryman. But Nastase was who I dreamed of being. There was a player in my generation who I genuinely believed was more talented than me, more talented than almost anyone, and for a period of time I was ranked above him. That always felt wrong to me, honestly wrong. His name was Miroslav Mecir. We called him the Big Cat, and if you never saw him play, I'm sorry, you missed something that cannot be described properly in words. The best anticipation of any player in our generation, without question. The most flexible, and those hands, crazy good hands. He could do things with a tennis ball that I spent my whole career trying to understand. He made the game look effortless in a way that was almost unfair to watch. I played him many times, and I want to be honest with you, walking onto the court against Mecir, I often knew what was coming. Not always, but often. He had this ability to take away everything you wanted to do before you even decided to do it. Like he was one step inside your head. In Wimbledon of '88, I was playing the best tennis of my life. Everything was coming together. And then I faced Mecir in the quarterfinals. Same story. He dismantled me quietly, efficiently, almost gently. That was somehow worse. I wasn't even angry. I was just impressed. Again, he should have won 3 or 4 Grand Slams. No question in my mind. The talent was absolutely there, more than there. To admire someone who beats you and to genuinely mean it with no bitterness, I think that says something about both of you. I'm proud of that feeling. I really am. The other 3 on my list, they're different. I didn't face them across a net. I watched them from a different place entirely. Behind the microphone, courtside, as someone who had already lived through his own career and was now just watching. And I want to tell you that is a privilege to see this sport at that level with that much experience behind you and still feel surprised, still feel something you didn't expect. 20 years behind that microphone, and what I witnessed changed how I think about tennis completely. Roger Federer made people fall in love with tennis, not just fans who already followed the sport. People who had never picked up a racket in their life, they would stop, watch Roger play, and suddenly understand why this game matters. That is not a small thing, that is actually everything. I want to make a distinction here. Best of all time, that's statistics. That's numbers on a page. Greatest of all time, that's something else entirely. And for what Roger gave this sport, the beauty, the elegance, the way he carried tennis into living rooms and conversations that had nothing to do with sport, I give it to him. No hesitation. Now, people remember something I said about Roger back in Paris after he lost to Rafa in the French Open final. I said he came out with no balls, and that created quite a reaction. But here is what people misunderstood. I said that because I believed in him, because I expected more. You don't say something like that about a player you don't care about. You don't get frustrated by someone who doesn't matter to you. I was almost angry because I knew what Roger was capable of, and I felt like we weren't seeing it. The players I criticize hardest are usually the ones I admire most. That's probably a flaw in me, but it's an honest one. When Roger retired, something left this sport that I'm not sure we'll ever get back. Not a record, not a title, a feeling. The feeling that tennis at its highest level could look like art, is completely effortless, completely beautiful. I miss that feeling. Rafael Nadal. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Rafa may be the most important tennis player we have ever had, male or female. And when I say important, I don't just mean the titles, the records, the clay court dominance. I mean something bigger than that. Every single match I have ever seen him play, he was 100% present. 100%. Not 90, not 95 on a good day. 100 every time. You could feel it from the stands. You could feel it through a television screen. That kind of presence is almost impossible to sustain. And he did it for 2 decades. Think about what that does to an opponent. More than half the match is already decided before they even walk on court. The other guy sitting in that locker room thinking, I am about to play Rafa on clay in 5 sets, and this is going to be painful. And he is right. That psychological weight, Rafa carried it like a weapon, effortlessly. Here's what moves me most about him. His work ethic and mine, there's a similarity there. I understand that mentality of grinding, of never giving a point away for free, of making the other player earn absolutely everything. But Rafa took it to a level I never found. A level I'm not sure I was even capable of finding. I remember watching him at the Davis Cup in Malaga, his last matches, his country, his home crowd, and Spain lost. And even then, even at the very end, he was all in, fighting for every ball like it was the first match of his career, not the last. That's when I knew. The titles told one story, but that moment told me who he really was. Roger left an aesthetic void. Rafa left an emotional one. And if I'm being honest, the emotional one is harder to fill because you can find beautiful tennis again someday. But that attitude, that complete, unconditional commitment every single time, I'm not sure we see that again. I hate the word GOAT. I really do. But if you ask me who is the best of all time, the best, not the greatest, there is a difference. I say Novak Djokovic. Without hesitation, but that's not why he's on this list. He's on this list because of something else entirely. Something that I think gets lost in all the debates about numbers and records and rankings. Think about what Novak had to do. He came after Roger. He came into a sport where people had already fallen in love with someone else. then Rafa. Two of the most admired athletes the sport had ever seen, and Novak had to compete with both of them at the same time for his entire career. Most players would have been quietly satisfied finishing third in that race. Novak never accepted that. Not for one single day. He lived through the storm. And he came out the other side with more than either of them. You know, I know something about reaching the top and then feeling nothing. That happened to me. I became number one, and within months I had emotionally checked out. I had found what I was looking for and I didn't know what to do next. It finished me. Novak never let that happen. Every time he thought he was done, every time the door seemed to be closing, he found another reason, another match, another motivation. That is not a tennis skill. That is something deeper, something I admire enormously because I know exactly how hard it is. Never bet against him. That's not analysis. That's respect. So, 5 names: Nastase, Mecir, Roger, Rafa, Novak. I look at them together and I notice something. Something I didn't plan to say, but I think is true. None of them were ever fully satisfied. Not one. Nastase always wanted more chaos, more art, more feeling. Mecir had talent that deserved more than it received. Roger kept coming back long after most people would have stopped. Rafa fought until the very last point of his very last match. Novak is still fighting right now. They all wanted something more, always. And me, I was satisfied. That's the honest answer. I reached number one and something inside me said, okay, that's enough. I found what I was looking for, and then I was finished. Maybe that's why I admire them, because they had something I didn't find in myself, that hunger that never goes quiet. You might wonder about some names I didn't mention: Borg, McEnroe, Lendl. I respect all of them enormously. I competed against 2 of them for years. But respect and admiration, as I said at the beginning, those are different things. And that difference matters more than people think. Ask me this question again in 10 years. I mean that seriously. The list might change. Alcaraz is doing things on a tennis court that make me feel something I haven't felt in a long time. Sinner too. That quiet, relentless precision. I recognize something in it I don't know yet. It's too early to say. Admiration takes time. You can't rush it. You watch and you wait, and one day you realize that person gave you something, a feeling, a moment, an understanding of what this sport can be at its absolute best. And you didn't even see it happening.